light will light up the whole thing, and we'll have this fantastic installation. To our surprise, a few weeks later, after that, they called us up and they asked if we were okay with maybe changing the name from Burning Moon to Golden Moon, then we could build it. Because burning in Chinese culture is either destruction or sacrifice, sacrificial to the gods. And they didn't want Mid-Autumn Festival to be about that. So we're like, yeah, of course, if you change the name, you want to do Golden Moon, we're very happy to that. So we accepted, but they gave us this schedule. So they called us at the end of June, and they basically gave us 3 weeks before we had to go through public tender, which takes a month, in which we cannot work, and we don't know who we're going to be working with. And at that point in time, we would know who the contractor is. Then we had 3 weeks for design, development, 11 days on site, 1 day for testing, 6 days festival, and then a day and a half, 2 days for demolition. But we're talking about a 6-story building. This was a 20-meter diameter dome that had to be basically designed in 3 weeks' time. So the design changed a little bit. We shrank the pool down for budget reasons, but in the end it remained this sort of pathway that goes inside the spherical structure, using the water to both become a safety barrier so that people wouldn't start messing around with the electronics, and create a reflection pool for the dome. Here you get a sense of the scale of it. And this structure was built up out of a steel flat base, because we could not drill into the ground, there were no foundations. So this was weighed down by a concrete slab. Then on top of that we had a steel geodesic dome, and this geodesic dome was then clad with 2 kilometers of bamboo, on which we had mapped 475 flames, each with different geometries, all unique. And that was the entire structure. So the design of this thing, this is the one that was on fire that I showed just a bit ago. This is a typical geodesic dome. You can see there's a lot of logics in there. There's a repetition in modularity. So by only designing a few components in this Bucky paradigm, you can design a whole sphere. The downside of this is that you cannot enter the sphere without really breaking through the system. It's very hermetically sealed. And we wanted to break away from that. So we found this other formula, which is done by Fibonacci, 17th century mathematician, which basically allows you to just throw objects at a sphere, and they will create polarity and irregularity at the nodes and quasi-repetition around the equator. So we wanted to use the systematic logic and the visual difference from this system to create a system that allowed us to build this in a short amount of time. And here you see the polarity of the whole thing. This is the interior view of the design model, where you see a very strong focus on that oculus on top that we wanted to play with. We managed to get this built only because we were in China. So we traveled across the border to Guangzhou, where we found a shipyard where they per year built around 20 200-meter long container ships by hand from these massive sheets of steel. And with these people, we did the steel structure. And the type of drawings that we gave them were this. It's a geodesic dome for our steel structure. So there's only 2 different types of members. And we drew what exactly that spherical member was. And all the intersections between the steel and the bamboo were marked up on the drawings, just extracted from our 3D models. And at the nodes, we wrote down which connections this member S7 would need to go with the other one. So a very simple standard construction drawing set. This is a technology that I used for that. Here in the back you can see this induction coil. It's basically glorified microwave that they just push these big steel pipes through. And then with these manually controlled rollers, they managed to turn them all into spherical curves. These are the pipes that they built. And when I visited the factory, at one point I saw these 2 guys, and I was asking what they were doing. They were trying to push me out of the factory. I insisted I needed to know what they were doing, because they were messing with the pipes. And what they had done is they had drawn the perfect circle of the sphere on the ground. And this is a bucket of ice water. That's a fan. And this is a blowtorch. And what they were doing is they were manually heating up the pipe on one side while cooling down another side, so that the whole thing would gradually find its final perfect shape. I thought that was very risky because we're dealing with these big pipes. So when I asked them, is it going to fit? Can we do a test assembly? They said, well, the test assembly is going to have to be on site because we don't have time for it. So I was a bit nervous, but we moved on. Everything was nicely built. Everything was nicely labeled and numbered according to our drawings. They did all the markings of all our bamboo intersections. Then they painted everything black. Then they had to do the markings again because somehow they knew the letter of what was asked, but didn't fully understand that the markings were actually to be used later on. So we redid the markings, and then we started assembling the structure itself. So here you see it on day 2, where we already had built a reflection pool. Here you see it on day 3, when the top part is being brought in. Now this is around 6.9 meters, and all of them are identical. So we were in this cherry picker frantically trying to check every member that was brought in to see if the orientation was correct, and to catch any mistakes that there were, but it worked out, and within 3 days we had the steel structure there. Then the mapping of the 2 kilometers of bamboo. So these are the big triangles, and we wanted to get a sphere, so we needed something to make the double curvature of the whole thing in between these planar triangles. So bamboo was the ideal material for that, and the way we designed that is we took all of these members, we laid them out digitally flat in a straight version, and then we marked up the intersection with the steel structure or with the other direction of the bamboo. I'll get back to this method a bit later with the final project. So this setup they could very easily do on site, use manual markings to put up the whole thing. And here you see the grid structure is a temporary scaffolding, and the big diagonals are the bamboo grid that's slowly going up. Here you see on day 6 where the lines start to move upwards. And here you see closer towards the end where they're starting to complete the oculus. And here we had a problem. We had calculated the radius of all of these members, which we could digitally identify quite well, but we had been overly optimistic with how much the bamboo could bend. And here on top, the material that came in was a bit older, a bit drier than what we had done our tests with. So it didn't manage to bend properly without breaking. So in the end, we had to tell the craftsman, just do whatever you can, make it look pro, because we didn't have permission to go to the construction site, let alone insurance. And we definitely could not climb up there. It was just too dangerous. So in the end, they just followed their intuition and their craftsmanship to make the oculus as well working as possible. And these were really amazing people. So in Hong Kong, all the scaffolding is built with bamboo, and these are the guys that are building it. They're using these plastic ties to connect the whole thing. They're all wearing safety harnesses, but they don't connect them to anything. At least very often they don't. Maybe the building code doesn't say that you have to connect them actually. But anyway, here you see them on top fixing that oculus problem that they had. A very interesting way. Then the flames. So originally we had designed a beautiful white lantern, and the idea was that the color would come from the LED lights. But then the client also told us white lanterns are only for funerals, so we cannot have a funeral in the middle of a festival. So they added another requirement that we were to have these 8 different colors as well. So here we have 475 different shapes, 8 different colors. And the way we solved that one is with a paramorph. So a paramorph is a shape, any shape, that is capable of changing its geometry a little bit within a certain boundary that you define. So what we did is we took all of these flames, we laid them out digitally next to each other, and we grouped them into the 8 most common denominators, and then worked on a detail that was able to absorb the deviation that we had within each and every one of these groups. So in the end, all we had to make is 8 colors, 8 shapes. None of all of them were being used, so it really brought down the complexity to just a few elements. And these shapes were easily fabricated. So here you see the fabric that was brought to site. Here you see the sheets that were cut, the stretch fabric, and then using simple bamboo and standard electrical tubing, we managed to make the hinges. Electrical tubing, if you heat it up with a heat gun, you can bend it, so we can make the hinges at the top. At the bottom, we needed to have wire connections, and you cannot drill through thin bamboo without splitting it. But the minute you put it inside a sleeve of plastic, you can just drill through it. So this became a very flexible and very simple detail, which was necessary because we only had a very short amount of time on site. And we had done our tests ahead of time to make sure that we could install 1 flame within 15 minutes. Because if you multiply that, that was 120 work hours needed in total. That was the maximum amount of time that we could use. So the way you did that is you start by fixing the corner here and here, stretching the main diagonal here. Then in the bottom sides, we had also bamboo inside sleeves that were stitched in. So these sleeves with sticks in it kept it nice and taut, the fabric. So we wrapped that around the diagonals of the bamboo, fixed it just with metal wire, and then the tip was hanging from a metal wire on top and that was it basically. So very quick installation sequence, and here you start to see how the bamboo diagrid, which is the main diagrid that's making the triangular span, gets fully absorbed into the geometry of the flames. These umbilical cord-like things that you see here, those are the LED lights. So we also made a 1 megapixel spherical screen that had to operate simultaneously and be installed simultaneously. So the way this worked, there's an equator here which is full of data boxes, and these data boxes send linear signals up according to the UV directions of these lights. And we had a digital software package developed that allowed us to map any type of video onto that spherical setup. So here you see them installing the lights in parallel with the installation of the flames. This is the day before opening, where you see it kind of still has a bad hair day. It's totally in shape, but it's not totally there yet. And that is because the tip, the parameter of the tip, was the one that we did not fully control with our digital design models. This is the view from above, where you see the other events being installed. So on the last day, what we did is, so these tips have flexible connection points. It's just a little clamp. What we did is we worked from the ground with these guys, and every 10-15 flames we positioned with them, saying more or less, and then they just manually interpolated the flames in between to get an overall comprehensive image. And the idea behind that was that we wanted to get a natural feel and a natural flow, but not a mathematically accurate, precise geometry that would be too stiff for the atmosphere that we had. Fun fact about these wires. So Hong Kong is a typhoon-prone country, and we had to have a typhoon plan as well. And we were in discussion with the government saying that, we said, well, there's nothing that can happen. First of all, there's nothing heavy there. The steel structure is not going to blow away, and the rest is just sticks and fabric. They're like, no, we need to have a typhoon plan. And it became really problematic. So at one point we said, okay, the typhoon plan is this. They're all connected with a wire that goes all the way to the top. Whenever there's a typhoon, we just get one guy in a cherry picker to go to the top, he clips all the wires, and then from the bottom, you just pull the metal wire at the back, and all the flames will open up, and then you can tie it and you fix it, and that's it. They're like, great, perfect typhoon plan, okay, you go ahead. Absolute bullshit, because first of all, it's a sphere, and if you're pulling here in this direction, but the wire goes up in a spiral, you're totally fighting it in the wrong way, so it doesn't work. Secondly, if you were to close these, the gap that you have here would actually be shut by the flame that you have on the other side, so you would increase the wind pressure. Are you filming this? I shouldn't be saying it. Perfect typhoon plan. Anyway, in principle, it doesn't really work, but it didn't matter. As long as it was a typhoon plan and we took responsibility for it, then we were okay to go ahead with it, which I thought was very peculiar, that they were living by the letter and not by the spirit. Anyway, this is a few hours before the opening, where they're taking down the scaffolding. That's around the time that we got building permission, so we were on an illegal construction site for 12 days. But then we got the go-ahead, and that's the structure right before opening, where you can see the stark coloration, and you see how we have the pole sort of messy and chaotic on top of it there. This is an hour before opening, where you see the very strong coloration again, and then as soon as nightfall came, the whole thing totally changed. It became this very soft, glowing object where the steel structure very gently radiated through the flames. The bamboo diagrid totally disappeared and totally got absorbed into the geometry of the flames that were wrapped around it. And the star coloration totally changed into a smooth color gradient that you can see here. I like how the fabric takes on the color of the edge as well, because it's colored but translucent. So it gets that nice cartoony feel. Very aggressive shape, like Sonic the Hedgehog eating all the people that go in. But still friendly in a way. Here you get a sense of the scale. So it's really big. And as you go in, you're really submerged into this otherworldly experience. So the idea was to create an installation that would take you out of this world into this otherworldly environment. And here you see all the elements and how messy it actually is. All the cables running around and how approximative the detailing is here and there. But it didn't matter, because as you entered into this space, all these lanterns, and that was part of the competition brief, we needed to have lanterns within lanterns. So we made these massive Chinese lanterns that are 2.5 meters diameter, but very similar to the little ones that you probably made in primary school. So all these lanterns were just hanging there, swinging in the wind. Then you had this swooping pattern that was constantly lively animated because of the light show that was going up there. So it was constantly taking your perspective to the top. And there was the music that was synchronized with it, and it really became this weird, very trippy experience to get inside of it. And all the details just disappeared and became part of a more holistic experience. Here you see the top. We have that flickering of the flame being recreated by the craftsman. These are all the colors that it could take. So the color of the fabric itself was overpowered by the LEDs. This is the only video we have of it. So just to give you a little bit of a taste of it. The client, pay attention to the music while I'm talking. So the client wanted to make a Chinese show in there as well. And we said we can design the whole thing, but they didn't want to. It needed to be more Chinese cultural thing, and we couldn't do that. So they hired a local light artist to make the light show. And so every 12 minutes you had a 3-minute show, which was this. So the typical, theme park spectacle. And then in between, in the 12 minutes in between, we could do whatever we wanted. Remember the music. Anyway, so in between that, we had our version of the light show, and there we did some non-linear programming where we had two main characters, Seung-mo and Ho-yi, that were traveling, wandering around the moon, and when they would find each other, they would speed up a little bit, and then when they would meet,